the FBI is still trying to validate their actions, which have been taking place here in the States. It's a little bit weird what's been going on with the FBI, actually, where the Federal Bureau of Investigation has been found to be flying different airplanes over U.S. airspace, particularly over in Baltimore and elsewhere. And they've been flying these drones for surveillance reasons. Now, people are making speculation that perhaps they had dirt boxes inside, which are devices that gather up cell phone information. We don't know that for sure, although it certainly is likely. Well, the FBI is now trying to defend their secret surveillance flights, and the Senate is trying to down them. So spy flights are actually legal, according to some, and only rarely do they use cell phone snooping technology. That's what the FBI is telling the Senate in a confidential briefing, defending a program that's been around for 30 years, but only recently attracted the attention of lawmakers and activists. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. This is a show we talk about technology and quite a bit more. And what's going on so far right now is the FBI trying to defend their actions, and it's appearing to quite a few people that their actions are illegal, and somehow the FBI thinks that they are not. I'm not sure how they're figuring that. So what happened was a lot of different airplanes from different shell companies, not shell oil companies, but shell companies as in proxy companies, were being used to buy airplanes and fly them in different areas of the United States for surveillance purposes. They're flying in a circular pattern all around the United States, and we don't really know why, other than just surveillance. That's all they'll really say. Agents told senators that most of their spy fleet uses commercially available still and video infrared cameras, while 15% of the planes rely on binoculars, according to Senate staffers talking to the Associated Press on the condition of anonymity. Only 8 pages, or rather only 8 planes, I should say, have high-def cameras, though the agency said that it would like to have more. The controversial dirt box technology, which simulates a cell tower signal and tricks mobile phones into revealing their identification numbers, has only been used 5 times over the past 5 years, according to FBI agents. Close to 2/3 of all spy flights are reportedly conducted as part of national security investigations. So last month, the Associated Press used flight records and radar data to reveal the existence of FBI spy flights over 11 states and the District of Columbia. The unusual effort to justify the FBI spy activity comes after a bipartisan proposal that would require federal agents to get a warrant before snooping from above, which makes sense, you'd think. I mean, you kind of should have to get a warrant if you're going to be doing any sort of intelligence operations, right? I mean, the Fourth Amendment's actually kind of clear on that. If you look at it, it's right here in front of me here. Well, just take a look at the Fourth Amendment, which very plainly says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So you would think that they'd have to acquire a warrant in order to carry out these different flights, but they're claiming that they don't. Well, this is sort of a bizarre idea to the FBI, and put forth by Senators Ron Wyden and Dean Heller is the Protecting Individuals from Mass Aerial Surveillance Act that would apply to both manned and drone flights and provide clear rules for the government's aerial surveillance. Americans, according to Senator Wyden, Americans' privacy rights shouldn't stop at the treetops. Technology has made it possible to conduct the round-the-clock aerial surveillance the law needs to keep up. So it appears that the FBI is acting outside the bounds of the law. And it comes as no surprise that the FBI would do such a thing, obviously, because the FBI is a federal agency, and federal agencies tend to act outside the bounds of what is legal, because after all, they make up law in the first place, so they can pretty much do whatever they want to do. Now, it's of note that there are only 2 senators who seem to be very concerned about this. The rest are probably talking with FBI agents about how they can conceal their involvement and complicity in allowing these things to happen, but it's appearing that only 2 senators so far really just care at all about what's happening here with the FBI planes. It's not surprising, actually, because probably the rest of them authorized it to happen in the first place. The Wyden-Heller bill would make all unlawfully collected information inadmissible in court and prohibit the government from identifying persons that show up incidentally in the course of surveillance unless there was probable cause to believe that they had committed a crime. It would also prohibit the government from contracting surveillance out to private operations or operators. Senator Heller said the bill would provide much needed clarity on what authority the federal government has related to aerial surveillance, and it would stop the government from trampling Americans' rights from above. The problem with this, though, is that this legislation does not stop local law enforcement from doing these things that we're trying to stop the FBI from doing. What this means is the FBI can ask a local law enforcement agency to start flying a plane around and do exactly what the FBI was doing, and then collect that information from the local law enforcement agency. So that's not really going to be protecting us much. It's just going to put the dirty work in the hands of a local agency instead of a federal one. So it seems like not a whole lot has been solved here, unfortunately for us. So the FBI, of course, is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And according to the AP, which discovered, I should say, quite a few shell organizations. They've been flying flights around several states, 11 states actually, in order to collect information on people. To what end? Well, that's where things start to get hazy because we don't really know to what end, right? Like the answer should be clear. It was for counterterrorism, or it's for law enforcement purposes, or it's for such and such. We don't really know why they're doing it. And that's kind of a problem because they say they're protecting us and we don't know what from, and we don't know how, and we don't know why. So it seems like our rights are constantly being trod upon, and there's not really a whole lot that can be done about it other than point out what's going on. The AP's investigation was published earlier this month. They traced 50 airplanes back to the FBI, flying over more than 30 cities in 11 states, as well as the District of Columbia. In addition to surveillance flights over Houston, Phoenix, Seattle, Chicago, Boston, Minneapolis, FBI spy planes also flew over Southern California and Texas. The airplanes were registered to at least 13 fake companies, including FVX Research, KQM Aviation, NBR Aviation, and PXW Services. According to law enforcement officials, Justice Department lawyers approved the decision to create fake companies to protect the flight's security. So different lawyers seem to think that this is totally okay, what's been going on here. And that's really a sign of the times, isn't it? That different lawyers and such think that it's totally okay for this to go on. So what would happen was there was an investigation that went on with different journalists who were trying to find out where exactly these flights were coming from. So they traced them back to different flight agencies through the flight plans. And it turned out that all these 13 different companies had exactly the same CEOs according to their websites. See, on the websites for these 13 different companies, they'd have photos of their staff, CEO, secretary, COO, whatever, and they were all the same person for each different company. I mean, it's a different person for each position, but from company to company, it was exactly the same. So they are also taken from stock photos. So we have the miraculous situation where these people who work for this flight agency who works with the FBI all work at different companies, all in the same positions, and they also happen to work at stock photo models. It seems a little bit unlikely, to say the least. Well, the airplanes were registered to 13 fake companies, and for some reason, the Justice Department, Justice Department lawyers approved the decision to create fake companies to protect the flight security. From what, though? I mean, obviously, the thing they're trying to protect these flights from is people finding out that this is going on. What's happening here? So we don't know why this is really being done. There's not really any official reason that's been offered up for why these flights are being conducted. We don't really know the answer to that question, and it's really frustrating how we just don't know why the FBI is doing this other than just surveillance. But to what end? Why are they surveilling? Is it for market research? Is it for command and control? Why? Well, there's not really any clear answer for that, unfortunately. And really, probably the only thing that can give us a clear answer is a Freedom of Information Act request, unfortunately. And it's more than likely that the Freedom of Information Act request will sort of be forgotten and never seen again. Well, speaking of Freedom Act, this is a hard day for me. Freedom of Information Act request. I haven't had my coffee yet. Journalists appeals lawsuit to force cops to give up information on Stingray usage. So the ACLU lawyer is saying that no investigative techniques exception is applying unilaterally. So what's been happening is a lawyer for the ACLU has been filing a Freedom of Information Act request and also a lawsuit against different law enforcement agencies in order to obtain information on their usage of stingrays. These law enforcement agencies are fighting back pretty strenuously, and that's where the story begins. But by the way, if you're looking to get a car for quite a low price, go over to Automax, which is a car lot where top quality used cars are $2,000 less than some of the other lots. It's an unpretentious little car lot just east of Central High on Highway 58. He has low overhead, no staff, and Louis does everything himself, and he passes the savings on to you. Everyone can get a car, and they can rebuild credit because Louis does report to all the different credit agencies. So everyone can get a car and rebuild credit. That's Automax at 643-2886, Automax 643-2886. Ask for Louis and tell him that you heard about him over on Hot News Talk Radio at AM 1240. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. By the way, you can also save half off if you go to Hot News Talk Radio and click on the half off link. We have a bunch of different items up there for sale. Par instance, we have a Jeep Grand Cherokee 1999 red model for not very much at all. Actually, it's a very low price for this Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I'm trying to pull it up now. It's a red 1999 model, and it should only cost you the low price of, if I can get it, there it is, $2,500 according to what I've got here, which is an incredibly low price for such a high quality vehicle. It's a 1999 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's a red model, and it has a nice interior. Does not have a CD player, but you know what? Big deal. You can always switch those out. Head units are so easy to switch out these days that it's just ridiculous. So a journalist is appealing a lawsuit to force cops to give up info on Stingray. So after losing in court 6 months ago, Arizona-based reporter Bo Hodai is filing an appeal earlier this week, or has filed an appeal earlier this week, in an effort to force the city of Tucson and the Tucson Police Department to disclose records pertaining to their use of cell site simulators. They're commonly referred to as stingrays. Cell site simulators can be used to determine a person's location by spoofing a cell phone tower, and they can also be used to intercept calls and text messages. Once deployed, these devices intercept data from a target phone along with information from other phones within range of the Stingray device. So what the Stingray device does is it basically fools your phone into thinking that it's connecting to a cell tower. Cell phones generally will connect to the strongest cell phone tower channel, or cell phone tower signal, I should say, in the area. So if you're on your cell phone and your cell phone sees a cell tower that's higher in power than another one, then it'll switch over to that one. Well, stingrays work by exploiting that, by broadcasting a relatively high power signal because it's on the ground right next to you potentially, and your phone will connect to that, and then the cell site simulator acts as an in-between between your phone and a cell tower, and it gathers up all the information that's being sent to the cell tower. So it's quite a lot of information that can be gathered up just from one little box. So for years, federal and local law enforcement agencies have tried to keep the existence of these Stingray devices a secret while simultaneously upgrading their capabilities. Over the last year, stingrays and stingray use have come under scrutiny, and new information about their secretive devices have been revealed. Hodai initially sued back in March of 2014 in an effort to learn more about how the devices are used locally. The Pima County Superior Court judge denied Hodai on the grounds that giving up such records would give criminals a roadmap for how to defeat the device, but is used not only by Tucson, but other local and national police agencies as well. We don't think that they're used by the Chattanooga Police Department directly here in the Chattanooga area. The problem is the U.S. Marshals Service does have access to Stingray devices, and we're speculating that it actually has been used just recently in the arrest of a man whose last name is Pam, who was hiding in a house. And for some reason, the federal marshals got involved and tracked him down to a very specific location in this house. And so we're thinking that a cell site simulator device was used in order to track him to this location, because there's really not much of any other way they could have found him as far as we know. And of course, any requests for comment have been immediately denied by both the federal marshals and the CPD. So there's not really a whole lot of way to determine if that's the case or not. It's all speculation at this point, but it seems to be quite likely that that is what went down. Lots of different federal agencies have access to the Stingray device, including U.S. SOCOM, Special Forces. Oddly enough, lots of different military and law enforcement agencies have access access to Stingray. But the police down in the Georgia Tech area actually have access to Stingray. That's the closest one that I can find. Actually, not even in Knoxville as far as the ACLU map goes. I don't think they're using them there. But of course, I try to keep that updated as much as I can. And if I find out that the law enforcement is using a Stingray device here in our area, I'll certainly let you know as soon as I find out right here on Hot News Talk Radio. In the appeal, Mr. Hodai's attorney from the American Civil Liberties Union of Arizona and Daniel Pochota is denying the lower court's claim of an investigative technique exception from the Arizona Revised Statute Title 39, the portion of the law pertaining to public records. So Mr. Pochota is writing that no prior Arizona court has found that an investigative technique exception applies across the board to requested records. The trial court did not demonstrate sufficient reason to apply the exception in this instance. The trial court simply stated this exception exists and justifies non-disclosure in this instant. The trial court did not demonstrate why the exception applied here, nor did they indicate any boundary or limit on this exception. The court below did not cite to the statutory language or Arizona court decisions, and instead found law enforcement investigative techniques are always exempt from the disclosure requirements of Arizona's public records law. In fact, a balancing test must be applied to each record to determine whether each specific record and piece of information must be disclosed. Ars Technica confirmed that 2 county sheriff's agencies in California have used Stingrays hundreds of times each in recent years without first obtaining warrants. Now, of course, that is illegal. That's obtaining information without a warrant, which is illegal. Again, Fourth Amendment covers that. So it's pretty plainly a crime what's been going on here. And yet, for some reason, nobody's wanting to call them out other than agencies such as the ACLU and the EFF. And that's where things start to get a little bit odd, because you'd think that the different cable news agencies would be all over this one, but they're not. Why not? Well, the different cable news agencies have I don't want to say agenda, although it's certainly possibly true. They have a status quo to maintain. And there are certain stories that must be put forward and certain stories which must be ignored. All the while we're talking about, say, Caitlyn Jenner, we could be talking about so many other things which are much more useful to us. Instead, we're hung up on talking about the Kardashian family, and we're hung up on talking about what Tom Cruise did in his apartment in Southern California. You know, we're hung up on talking about these things instead of what's actually important. And the news agencies these days don't seem to be, and I don't even want to say these days because it seems like this has always been the case, they don't seem to be too interested in actually pushing news nearly so much as they're interested in pushing whatever they think will get them ratings. That's what it's all about when it comes right down to it. Well, here at Hot News Talk Radio, we care not for ratings. I don't care if people listen or not. So I'll talk about what I want to, and I'll talk about what I think is interesting and what's informative and what's important. So it's very important that I keep the precious listener informed, which is you. So I need to keep you informed, and I need to make sure that you know what needs to be known. There are a lot of things that a lot of people, for some odd reason, don't know about that really should be known, like Stingray devices. Not a whole lot of people actually know about these. Why not? Like, not a whole lot of people actually know that Stingray devices are being used by law enforcement, or they don't want to know. That's another thing. A lot of people are afraid to know about these certain things, and it's very frustrating. People say, well, the government has something to hide, and they have a good reason for it. And that's as far as it goes for them. They don't want to hear anything more about it. If you try to tell them about Stingray, you try to tell them about how it's illegal, they just roll their eyes. I don't know how they would roll my eyes. That'd be creepy. They roll their eyes. And they say, well, you're just a crazy conspiracy theorist. Except this is very well documented. This is legally proven. We have court documents to prove this is happening. Sorry, I bumped the microphone. We have legal documents to prove that this is happening. And it's like people just don't want to hear about it. It's very frustrating. For some odd reason, I don't want to say the general public, but a lot of people are just not interested in hearing about what's actually going on in the news. And instead, they're far more interested in hearing about whatever political scandal is going on. You know, these things are not really that important compared to what's going on with different agencies quite blatantly breaking the law, and not really anybody's going to do anything about it. That's something that has to be realized, too, because you have to have it's a phrase I've coined, controlled apathy. Now, you're free to use that phrase, controlled apathy. It's open source. You can use it as you will. But controlled apathy is something that we all must have. This controlled apathy is the idea that we know the government can't last forever. We know the federal agencies are totally inept at doing their jobs. And so really the best option is to just point and laugh and have a sense of humor, because the government has no sense of humor whatsoever. How could it? It's an entity, not a person. It's so impersonal that it's not worth our time half of the time. So avoiding all dealings with the federal agencies is probably the better option for us. And it's important to know where our rights are being violated. Certainly, it's important to know where we are being abused and where our rights are being infringed. But it's also important to realize that sometimes there's not a whole lot that we can do about it. And that's okay, because it's kind of bound to collapse anyway. I mean, you really think a system such as this one is going to keep itself upright for as long as it hopes to? It really can't. Empires collapse all the time, and that's okay. For some reason, people think that when there's an absence of government, everyone will just go nuts. Like if there's no cops around, people just go crazy and start shooting each other. And really, it doesn't work that way. If there was suddenly no government, would you go crazy and start shooting your neighbor? Probably not. In fact, you'd probably run a lesser risk of being shot or your dog being shot during a home invasion raid. So it seems like we'd be better off without their help, perhaps. I know that's a crazy idea, but it might work.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway near Holcombs. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. The 9 victims of the shooting at a church in South Carolina will be honored tonight. Charleston Mayor Joe Riley inviting people to take part in a
community prayer service and vigil at 6 o'clock at the College of Charleston TD Arena.
A short while ago, suspect Dylan Roof was charged with 9 counts of murder, as well as possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. Meanwhile, authorities hoping for new leads in the hunt for 2 escaped killers.
Richard Matt and David Sweat are now on the U.S. Marshals 15 most wanted list. They broke out of Clinton Correctional Facility on June 6th, and a massive manhunt to find them has been underway ever since. Matt was serving a sentence of 25 years to life for the murder of a man he beat and dismembered in 1997. Sweat was serving a life sentence for killing a sheriff's deputy in 2002.
Fox Radio's Tanya J. Powers. And unemployment rates rose in half of the U.S. states last month. Fox News. We report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
There are quite a few drone operations going on presently overseas and possibly here. That's up for debate among some. We know that there have been unmanned flights for surveillance purposes here. There's no question about that. However, there have been questions being asked about, whether or not there's flights being flown overseas that are possibly unlawful. After all, the United States is one of the few countries that's not a member of the International Crimes Court, so it's hard to be held accountable for such things. It's hard for anyone to really hold the United States accountable for its actions. Now, I'm talking about, of course, the government here, because you're not complicit in the murdering of anyone overseas. Really, I kind of doubt that you are. So it's one of those things where you just look at it and you go, man, why aren't we holding ourselves accountable? And, well, there are people who are trying to make us hold ourselves accountable who are working in actually or formerly worked in the service. It's 43 different people, 45, I should say, 45 veterans signed a letter urging drone pilots to stand down. So we have a lot of drone operations overseas. We see this as a good thing, of course, right? Well, I don't, but a lot of people seem to see this as a good thing. There's people who will defend this to the end of time. They say that these drone operations save thousands of lives, even though they kill thousands of people as well. So it seems to be a little bit contradictory. You see, the thing with drone operations is they tend to use things called missiles. And missiles, believe it or not, explode. And when missiles explode, there's such a thing as collateral damage. Now, if you're targeting, say, one person who's in a village who you believe may or may not be a terrorist, we don't know, and they fire a missile at you and blow you up, there's such a thing as collateral damage. So now you've killed a kid in this village, or you've killed a regular guy who was walking down the street to go to the grocery store, or you've killed your friend's grandmother. You've killed quite a few people with one missile that was targeting one person. And for some reason, we sort of ignore that and say, well, it's a necessary evil, even though there's no such thing as a necessary evil. Well, a group of 45 former American military members have jointly signed a letter pushing drone operators to step away from their controls and refuse to fly any more lethal missions. The letter draws attention to the controversial operation of drones in foreign nations, where lethal strikes in countries such as Afghanistan and Pakistan have damaged terrorist networks, but have also claimed the lives of innocent civilians. Something that drives me crazy, by the way, is how people pronounce different things. In the Middle East, they don't appear to have the long A sound. Or the hard A sound that we have here, where we say a lot. They don't really use that in speech a lot in the Middle East. I don't believe Arabic really has the a sound, much less I don't think Egyptian did either. So it's Iraq, not Iraq. It's Pakistan, not Pakistan. I know that's really hard, especially for Americans. Pardon me, especially for Americans, but it's one of those, sorry, I have congestion, allergies are driving me nuts these days. It's one of those things that's really hard for Americans to pronounce anything properly. Like we say Torino instead of Turin. I don't know why. We say a lot of things incorrectly here in the States, and I'm not sure why. We tend to spell things wrong too. Like we don't spell color right. We spell it O-R instead of O-U-R. I don't know why we do that either, but anyway, very strange, very strange. Well, in Pakistan, it's actually pronounced Pakistan, and in Iraq, it's actually pronounced, well, Iraq and not Iraq. But even the ad council will put out ads where they say Iraq, and I don't know why, because it's incorrect, but it drives me crazy. Well, these 6,000 lives have been unjustly taken by U.S. drone strikes, says the letter. Drone attacks in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, the Philippines, Libya, and Syria. These attacks are undermining principles of international law and human rights, the authors wrote, according to The Guardian. KnowDrones.com, which is KNOW drones, as in like knowledge, KnowDrones.com, which sent out the letter, is also looking to distribute them by hand outside several military bases where drone operators are known to work, including Beale Air Force Base in California and Hancock Field Air National Guard Base in New York. Of the 45 veterans who signed the letter, the highest-ranking individual is retired Army Colonel Ann Wright, who resigned from the military because she disagreed with the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Previously, Ms. Wright served as a diplomat in several countries. So she says, I've traveled to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and Gaza to talk to victims of U.S. and Israeli drones, she said in an email to Air Force Times, explaining why she signed the letter. Because of the number of civilian casualties, I firmly believe that this weapon system is jeopardizing U.S. national security and creating large numbers of people who despise the United States. And, of course, Israel as well for the drone use in Gaza, where they're blowing up people for being Palestinian, I guess. This happens actually quite a lot overseas. You'd be surprised. People don't want to know about this, though. This is one of those things where people don't really want to know. If we talk about casualties that are being carried out by the United States, we talk about innocent civilians who are being killed by service members, we don't really want to talk about that. We say, well, it's justified. There's a thin, I guess, OD green line that we just don't cross, and it's all this nonsense. And it's ridiculous because people do not want to talk about atrocities that are committed by our own military. People don't want to talk about that. It's just one of those things where people are almost afraid to tackle the subject. Very obnoxious. Well, KnowDrones.com is the group that's aiming to rally support around an international ban against weaponized drones, as well as unmanned aerial vehicles used for surveillance purposes. The group has also launched a campaign dubbed Refuse to Fly that specifically urges drone pilots to stop carrying out operations in various countries. Navy veteran Nick Mautern, who also works for KnowDrones.com, explained to Air Force Times why he believes a drone pilot might hang up the controller, saying, one answer would be to save your soul, he said. Another answer would be to not kill people who are being targeted without any due process. There are higher laws than military law. And that's one of the big problems as well, is these are suspected terrorists, right? These are not proven terrorists. These are suspected terrorists. So we know that there's a suspect right now in that shooting that happened in South Carolina. Now, this is a tragic event, right? This is an awful thing that happened in South Carolina where I believe 9 people passed away as a result of this shooting. So 9 people were slain. This is a terrible thing. There's no doubting that. The man who's being accused is just that. He's being accused. He's a suspect. He's not been proven to be guilty. So we don't know yet if he's guilty or not. Mr. Roof, I believe his name is. So we don't know if he's guilty or not. So thus, it would not be just to shoot him right now. You know, like Lee Harvey Oswald was suspected of having shot JFK. Now, we don't know for sure if he actually did. There's been quite a few different investigations. It's a very interesting topic that we don't have time to get into right now, but he's been suspected of having shot JFK with his rifle. Okay, well, we know that. Now, Jack Kirby, when he shot Mr. Oswald, was not just in his actions, because Jack Ruby, not him, but Lee Harvey Oswald was not proven to be guilty in a court of law. Thus, it would be unjust to execute him in the way Jack Ruby did. So that action was unjust. So the same thing applies here when we're talking about suspected terrorists, right? These people are suspected terrorists, thus not proven terrorists. So we can't prove that they did anything wrong at all, but we'll blow them up because, well, they might or they could. That's not proper procedure. Imagine if there was some sort of awful situation like that here where there's somebody who's suspected of having done something wrong, and he might even be innocent, but the government decides, well, due process doesn't really apply here and just sends a drone out to blow him up. The same thing is what's happening overseas, except the people are different from us, and thus it's okay. And it's very unfortunate that people will see this as actually okay and the right thing to do in order to protect national security, which is always the pillar that we put everything on. Well, this past April, the group aired a brief television commercial, that's KnowDrones.com, that played near U.S. bases where drones are operated, arguing that no one has to obey an immoral law, which is true. If a law is immoral, you do not have to follow it. In fact, I would argue if a law is immoral, then it's not proper law anyway. If a law violates biblical law, then it's not an actual law. Or if a law violates constitutional law, it's not an actual law in that case either. It's, well, wrong. So you do not have to follow an immoral law. U.S. drones have murdered thousands, including women and children, the commercial stated, before urging drone pilots to please refuse to fly. For its part, the Air Force dismissed the idea that drone pilots are working beyond the confines of the law, saying, "Our remotely piloted aircraft operators perform a critically important mission that contributes significantly to national defense," says Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Carnes to the Military Times, saying, "They are professional and comply with applicable law, policies, and adhere to very exacting procedures." That doesn't really mean a whole lot, though, if those exacting procedures are directly against the people in these different countries, are directly targeting the people in these different countries. It doesn't seem that that's a very just thing to do. You have to consider biblical principle here as well, where perhaps you're not a Christian, and it's understandable, of course, but you have to understand that our culture is based upon the Christian principles, where the idea is that eye for an eye and tooth for tooth is not as brutal as it may sound. The idea behind that is the punishment must fit the crime. So the punishment, if it doesn't fit the crime, is then unjust. So an unjust punishment, be it too lenient or too severe, is unjust in and of itself. So it appears that the Air Force is not properly following proper procedure when it comes to punishment. Nevertheless, the Air Force has acknowledged a different sort of problem with drone pilots being burnout and stress. According to the New York Times, the Air Force is scaling back on the number of drone flights as many pilots, upon completing their service, choose to leave rather than stay on. It's a very stressful position. I mean, after all, you're kind of killing people from the comfort of your lounge chair. That seems a little bit odd. It seems a little bit disconcerting for someone who may serve in that capacity. And it's understandable that people would not want to do that again. Yeah, I don't think I would want to do it in the first place, honestly. For some reason, people keep signing on to do it, perhaps out of a sense of nationalism, perhaps out of a sense of patriotism. Either way, people keep signing on to do it. I'm noticing a pattern as well when it comes to the armed forces, where people are not wanting to sign on as much as they were before. People seem to be a little bit burned out when it comes to the military. People seem to be a little bit less than eager to sign up these days. Now, that perhaps speaks a lot about my generation, and perhaps it speaks a lot about the political climate that we have. Either way, people are less inclined to sign up for the armed services. Perhaps out of a sense of morals, they think that what's going on overseas is wrong. Perhaps out of a sense of not wanting that particular career path, but nevertheless, people are not wanting to sign up for the military nearly as much as they were before, despite the rather strenuous marketing efforts of all the different military operations. We see the Navy is advertising before every movie now. You ever go to a movie in the last, say, year, you've gone to see a movie in the theater, chances are you saw an ad for the United States Navy, which my friends and I think are actually pretty funny, but you keep seeing these different ads for the Navy just all the time, ads for the Navy, ads for the Marines, ads for the such and such. Just everybody's wanting you to join up, ads for the Coast Guard even. You know, people are wanting you to sign up pretty badly, and it seems that people in my generation are really just saying, hey, no, I don't really want to. And that's okay, actually. Well, as many as 65 drone flights take place every day. But despite initial hopes that flights could top 70, the number is now looking to cut the number down to 60 by October. Back in January, the Air Force announced that it would pay drone pilots more to keep working, but as people leave regardless, the service cannot train enough people to keep up with the quantity needed to maintain the current number of daily flights. Speaking with the Times, Colonel James Clough, the commander of the Air Force's 432nd Wing, described some of the stress that is affecting pilots, saying, having our folks make that mental shift every day, driving into the gate and thinking, all right, I've got my war face on and I'm going to the fight, and then driving out of the gate and stopping at Walmart to pick up a carton of milk or going to the soccer game on the way home, and the fact that you can't talk about most of what you do at home, all those stressors together are what's putting pressure on the family and putting pressure on the airmen. Despite not actually flying themselves, the drone operators are still just as likely as normal pilots to suffer from mental health issues such as depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, according to a Defense Department study from 2013. So it begs the question, why are people subjecting themselves to that these days? Why are we doing that when most of us understand that the war on terror is a crock and most of us understand the different operations overseas are a distraction? So why are we subjecting ourselves to that? Well, it seems that most of us aren't these days because not a whole lot of people are wanting to sign on. And that's actually kind of okay because perhaps that's not necessarily such a bad thing, people not wanting to sign on. The Secret Service and an agent for the Secret Service actually kind of stole $820,000 from the Silk Road. Now he's pled guilty, according to these allegations. The Silk Road saga has had a stunning coda in April when two of the federal agents who investigated the site were charged with stealing from it as well. The Silk Road, in case you don't know, was the bastion of free markets on the internet. The Silk Road was a website where you could buy and sell drugs online. It was really cool. You could buy and sell drugs online, and you got them at real market value. They accounted for risk, they accounted for the cut that Silk Road got, etc. You were actually buying at real market value. And it was something that was really kind of fascinating when you think about it, how you could just order these objects, which are rather illicit, and just have them shipped straight to your door. The funny thing about prohibition, by the way, is it doesn't really work. Think about it. I could walk out the door right now and probably get weed if I wanted to. In fact, I know I could, but I don't really feel like it, so I won't. But nevertheless, it's not really going to stop me, right? Like if I really wanted to, I could. So it seems prohibition doesn't particularly work if I could just go out and do exactly the thing that they prohibit me from doing, right? So it seems that criminalization of this particular act is kind of a waste of time, seeing as it doesn't actually harm anyone except for the person who consents to being harmed by it. So it's one of those situations where people, for some reason, think that this is such an awful thing, and it's our duty to stop people from doing what they want to do. Well, the Silk Road was a website on Deep Web where you could obtain drugs from the internet and have them shipped straight to your door in a vacuum-sealed package. One of the two agents has now reached a plea with prosecutors, a plea deal with prosecutors. Sean Bridges is a computer expert for the U.S. Secret Service. He's accused of stealing $820,000 worth of bitcoins from various drug dealers on the site. Mr. Bridges has regretted his actions from the very beginning, Bridges' lawyer told Bloomberg News, saying his decision to plead guilty reflects his complete acceptance of responsibility and is another step towards rehabilitation. So, nevertheless, he kind of stole money, according to these allegations. So whether or not there's rehabilitation doesn't particularly matter, because he should be punished for committing this crime if indeed he's found to be guilty of committing this crime. After Bridges and other agents who were a part of a Baltimore-based task force arrested Silk Road admin Curtis Green, they were briefed by Green about how to use admin powers on the site. Prosecutors accused Bridges of using those admin powers to go into the website and seize control of dealer accounts and draining them of their bitcoins and then moving them into his own accounts, thus allegedly stealing money. It was Bridges' massive theft that led Silk Road boss Ross Ulbright, who operated online as Dread Pirate Roberts, to contract a murder for hire against Green, who he believed had perpetrated the theft. That resulted in a murder for hire charge against Ulbright, which is still pending. We don't know if he's guilty of that or not. After a 3-week jury trial, Ross Ulbright was then convicted of drug trafficking charges in addition to charges related to money laundering, distributing a fake ID, and distributing computer hacking tools. Last month, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Accusations, against a second Baltimore agent, Carl Force, have not been settled. Force is accused of trying to extort Ulbright and then later using a separate identity to offer to sell him law enforcement counterintelligence information. Force is now in custody and scheduled to appear in court in August. Bridges will formally enter his guilty plea in late August or early September. Could it be that the folks who work in government are just as corrupt as the people they're trying to stop, if not more so? Well, yeah, actually, it seems quite likely, come to think of it, because it seems to be that's the case almost all the time. We keep seeing problems where agents who are supposed to be enforcing the law are really not doing a very good job of it and are actually breaking the law in the course of their duties, so-called. So we keep seeing that happening, and it's a very obnoxious situation as well, where we keep seeing law enforcement officers actually just breaking the law outright in order to do what they deem to be right, even though it's actually not. It's enforcing immoral laws. Well, have you had a car that has an automatic braking system? Well, it turns out that the automatic braking systems might actually be braking at the wrong time, according to some investigators. And by the way, if you're wanting to get a car, go to Automax, which is a car lot where top quality used cars are $2,000 less than other lots. It's an unpretentious little car lot just east of Central High on Highway 58. He has low overhead, no staff, and he does everything himself, and he passes the savings on to you. Everyone can get a car and rebuild credit. That's Automax at 643-2886. Just ask for Louie, and when you get in touch with him, tell him that you heard about him here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240. Bruce Krebs as well over at the Entrepreneur Source will get you into a franchise and with our local economy. That's Bruce Krebs of the Entrepreneur Source at 875-5621. That's 875-5621. Well, with all the hype surrounding fully autonomous cars, we sometimes forget that we've yet to master the comparatively basic driving assist technology that we're already using on the road today. One example is automatic braking systems, or ABS brakes, with U.S. regulators this month announcing a preliminary investigation into the 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee after complaints that the vehicle's automatic brakes have been triggering for no good reason. In an official filing from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, investigators reported 9 complaints about SUV's automatic braking systems. These covered multiple events at different locations and road conditions. And in 2 of the complaints, the drivers noted that there were no objects on the road at all. Consumers allege incidents of random proximity collision alerts, followed by inappropriate automatic braking with no pending threats in the line of travel, says the report. There are no reported crashes or injuries linked to the investigation, but if it turns out to be true, that means that cars were braking at random for no good reason, which can lead to confusion at worst, or confusion at best, I should say, and a wreck and potential death at worst. So not something you want to have to deal with. This is far from the first time ABS brakes have come under scrutiny, with the Wall Street Journal noting that Honda, Fiat Chrysler, and GM vehicles have all been the subject of similar complaints. Earlier this year, for example, Honda recalled just under 48,000 vehicles after the company's automatic braking system was found to be activated when cars were driving alongside a metal fence or a guardrail and the vehicle in front accelerated. And in 2012, a pair of Nissan Infiniti JX35 SUVs both hit brakes automatically in separate episodes at the same spot in the New Jersey Bridge after mistaking a grate for a barrier. At the time, a spokesperson for Nissan told the New York Times that the incident was not viewed as a safety issue. Well, I beg to differ with the man from Nissan. If my car brakes for no reason, I would call that a safety issue. These complaints are relatively uncommon, though, considering that around 630,000 vehicles are sold in the U.S. this year, and they're thought to have automatic braking systems. This number, which is produced by market analysts at Navigant Research and reported by the Wall Street Journal, is expected to rise to $10 million, or rather $10 million, I should say, not dollars, by the year 2020. The NHTSA also apparently has faith in the technology, of course, and this year they added automatic braking systems to its list of recommended safety features. Car manufacturers, however, still have some fine-tuning to do, of course. I've been reading into cars quite a lot recently, mostly because I want to get a new one, but also because I'm a little bit interested in the topic of them and also the trade that's involved in making sure they get shipped out properly. Something I noticed, though, is that back in the 80s, the car industry here in the States kind of should have collapsed. And it only didn't really because of trade regulations that were put on the import of Japanese cars or foreign cars in general. Back in the 80s, Japanese cars were higher quality and they were cheaper than American cars, oddly enough. So then President Ronald Reagan decided to press an embargo on the import of Japanese cars in order to save the American car industry, which is kind of a hypocritical move considering that he claimed to be for the free market. Well, it's apparent that he was not at the time, if ever, and it becomes apparent that neither party really is in favor of a free market. You see, that's something that has to be understood. When we're talking about cars, we're talking about politics, we're talking about anything at all, you have to understand that there are different sides to each issue. And there's the one side that is the two different parties, and then there's the other side that's not, which means that the two parties are on the exact same side. That's how it always is, probably always has been. Very minor issues are the issues that the two parties disagree on. You have the Republicans who are basically exactly the same thing as the Democrats, and you have the Democrats who are basically exactly the same thing as the Republicans. And I was reading that article about the embargo against Japanese cars here in the States, and that just really steamed me because people talk all day about Saint Reagan, Saint Ronald Reagan, about what a great president he was. And yet he enacted these different measures that were totally anti-free market. It seems to be quite obvious then that the two parties are not pro-free market, because how could they anyway? How could a political system such as the one we have be pro-free market at all? Because it's designed specifically not to be. After all, the two parties are bowing at the feet of the Federal Reserve every day, and it's really just no surprise that the two parties are not actually in line with a free market system. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. It's the show we talk about technology and quite a bit more. Dukenomics.com with David Toulis is coming up in just a few seconds right here on Hot News Talk Radio at AM 1240 and AM 12, or rather hotnewstalkradio.com as well, and get the TuneIn app to listen on your smartphone.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the mob. Don't worry, just relax. You need a car? Come to Automax.
My wife and I keep the cost down. We sell a quality vehicle at a great price. Our overhead is low. I have no employees, so I can keep my costs down. In turn, the consumer gets a better price. Everything that I sell is emission ready. We really try to go the extra mile for our customer. I don't have to pay an employee commission. I don't have to pay somebody to come out here and wash my cars. You know, I do it all from buying to selling from A to Z. I don't have the overhead where I have to raise the price on my vehicle to cover costs. Here at Automax, you're going to guarantee that you